forest as an investment. And this is a sort of a harsh way to look at it. You know, it's taking trees, which in most cultures are a very spiritual thing, that have a lot of different benefits, and like all those intangibles, I'm sort of setting those aside. You can see I'm wearing a shirt that has a tree on it. You know, I really like trees, but we're going to try and focus this down to really get them into a view that cities and municipalities are going to say, okay, I'm going to take this seriously, not just as, you know, this frilly little, you know, stick with all this foliage on it. It's actually doing some good. So when you're coming through and you're doing all these different considerations, you're looking at an investment that you want to be stable and efficient. So stable, this is now looking at it, the tree through different disturbances. Same thing with your stormwater infrastructure. You want an earthquake, you want a huge tornado, you want them to still work even though some crazy thing could happen. Through changing climatic conditions. So for trees, these are two really important things. You want your whole urban forest to stay stable through drought, you want through insect disease outbreaks, through windstorms, through ice storms, rainstorms, and you want it to maintain that over time. And right now, as we look forward over time, changing climatic conditions are what we're really dealing with here. So, and next is efficiency. You want the highest return on investment. If any of you have stocks or bonds or anything like that, you really want those. If you put in $1, in 20 years, you want to have $5 million. That's the grand scheme. You want a high return on investment. I almost said like $5, and I was like, that's ridiculous. So you want a high return on your investment in every way. So when you have that really high investment, that encourages more investment into it. So if you can show a city like what New York did and say, hey, we are making, for every dollar we put in, we're making $5 in this urban forest. All of a sudden the city's going to be like, wow, if we look at that as an investment, that's a great return. That is 500% return on investment. Let's invest into that. And that's how you can quantify and show, you know, we're doing all of these different considerations in choosing this tree to plant right here to accomplish these objectives. This is what it looks like, and you do this analysis, and then the city is like, huh, you look like an engineer. At one point when I gave a talk similar to this, I tried to coin the term urban forest engineer, and it just fell flat. No one even paid attention. So if you guys start using that, give me credit. You're like, see, he came up with that. You know, or like, you know, if it comes up again on like Wikipedia, like originally coined, but that'd be great. So encourage more investment when you have high return on investment. So what we want to do is look at our urban forest and focus on these two things, and that is what the rest of this talk is going to be. So this is a quick breakdown of why conifers have a certain amount of, or certain ability to make a urban forest, or how they can help create a more efficient and more stable urban forest. So canopy-dependent ecosystem services, I think that is a term that I came up with, or at least put two words together. Basically what that is the idea that if there's no canopy, there's no service. That seems pretty obvious, but it also is sort of unintuitive. You know, not a lot of people think about it. But some examples: rainwater inception, pollution, physical barriers, buffers, wildlife cover. Here's a really great, I had to do this as a visual example in a class. I was like, well, it's going to be really easy. Just do this, and then everything changes. You know, all of a sudden, a lot of the water goes through. Yes, Shane, there's an extraordinary amount of water that hits the bark, that hits the branches. Every time I give this talk, I'm like, oh, it's negligible. Then I just keep on moving on. So credit, she's right. So this is still doing something, but it's not doing as much as it did when it had its full leaves on by an extraordinary amount. So when we look at what's changed here, it's considerably very little. So we still get all those interception benefits that we had when that tree was in summertime versus in wintertime. And this is because of leaf area index. So this is taking what the previous folks were talking about, just taking it down one level where the density of the tree canopy was coming into question, or came up as a topic. So what they're really studying, or what the scientists are studying, is leaf area index. And that is a measure of the tree canopy over a period, or over a section of area. So basically, let's take a square meter of the ground underneath the tree, and you look up and say, okay, how dense is that tree? So it can be well over, 300%, because you have different layers of branches that can come over. So the higher the leaf area index, the more dense a tree is, or a given space of a tree or a tree canopy over an area. So evergreen species maintain high leaf area indices year-round, and that seems pretty obvious. They don't lose their leaves. And this is evergreen species, so this also is evergreen broadleaves, which are a really important consideration. So they do it individually, this one tree, but also they do it collectively as a forest of trees. That forest will have a higher leaf area index than a comparable forest of broadleaf, rather just deciduous trees. So stormwater management, this is where evergreen species really do shine. And they have these 3 different examples. And this goes over sort of comparing individual broadleaf and broadleaf deciduous and broadleaf evergreen trees. This is the first one where you have a single evergreen broadleaf intercepted 27% of gross annual rainfall. And this is just, they measured 2 trees right next to each other, and they were like, okay, let's see which one intercepts more over the course of the entire year. And so they found that the deciduous deciduous broadleaf had only 15% of annual rainfall, which is still significant, still really good, but almost double if you make that an evergreen tree. Evergreen coniferous forest intercepts 20 to 40% gross annual rainfall as compared to 10 to 20 for a broadleaf deciduous forest. And yes?
So basically, because we're working on an issue where we're having to remove some trees and maintaining trees. So if you've got a clump of 6 or 7 evergreens that are, their canopies are sort of doing this business, that's what increases the...
not necessarily.
Casey?
Yes. Could you repeat that question?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So the question was, if you have one evergreen tree doing some interception just right here versus a small clump or a grove of them, does that help increase the overall leaf area index? Is that the question? So I can't speak to that. That would be the scientist that you'll have to ask. These studies and the studies that I've read, they didn't differentiate necessarily between that. Basically, that's just saying if you have one high leaf area index tree and another high leaf area index tree, you put them together, then you have a group with high leaf area index. Not necessarily that if you, like the sum of the parts is the same as if they're all separated, but I'm not sure. I can't answer that, I don't know. Yeah, so I haven't read a study that sort of differentiated between the two. But there is, I did read one study actually this last one, now that I think about it, basically compared the trees as open grown versus in a forested condition, and they did find pretty significant differences. I think I can actually answer your question because and the reason was, if you picture an open grown tree, yes, where you have it growing here, and this is going to be a big tall tree, and then it has canopy coming all the way down like this. Then you have a high leaf area index because they're looking at the leaf area index from right here. So you have this entire section that's a really dense tree for a really long way, very high. Versus a canopy of very closely grown trees where you have a big canopy over on this side, and then you have canopy up over like this, and then you have this one comes out like that, but then this one maybe only has some right there, and right there. So in this one, you have a high leaf area index over this entire area, but this individual tree, as compared to say this individual tree, this one's going to be a lot higher than this one. So they're sort of comparable, but sort of not comparable. You sort of have to parse them out, and it's hard to actually say yes, this one has more than these ones because it's sort of looking at different situations. If that makes sense.
So it sounds like you might have to know a little bit too about how far apart the different.
Yes, yeah. Spacing, what the leaf area index is, this tree, and this tree, and this tree, and this tree, and then this one has a huge one on the side. So yeah, it gets really complicated really quick. Yeah. So anyway, that's last study, so that's really helpful. We just went right into it. So what's curious about this, or what these studies are showing, is that if you have evergreen species, they tend to have higher leaf area indices, which means they tend to have more interception benefits, because the higher the leaf area index is, the more dense the tree is, the more water it's actually going to hold on. The more leaves you actually have water absorbed, or not absorbed, but just sitting on top of those leaves due to water tension. So this is a deodar cedar right here, and you can see there's a lot of stuff there. You can't even see through it, much less drop the water droplets straight down. So you get a really good amount of interception. And this is another thing that someone that we believe the folks brought up earlier. So this is a comparison of the leaf on versus the leaf off season in Boston, Massachusetts, and Portland, Oregon. And what's important about this is that whenever someone in Oregon or Seattle or Pacific Northwest plants a tree, in order to have a lot of benefit for stormwater management.